Shrine name, sing for the king.
The game is yours to play now.
The light provides.
This is Eventide Radio.
Hello and welcome back to Eventide Radio. This is a fan-made Destiny podcast where we have roundtable discussions about a variety of different topics concerning the popular video game franchise. At its core, this show is about having in-depth discussions about the game from a variety of different perspectives. I'm host Scotty, and with me are co-hosts Rob and Robbie, and today we're diving into the new Season of the Haunted. So, spoilers for the first week of Season of the Haunted is ahead. Without further ado, welcome back to the Leviathan. The Grand Emperor Callus has illegally parked his world-eating spaceship right outside the spooky black triangle inside the moon. Eris Morn decides the best course of action is to perform some weird hive ritual to bind our souls to these freaky ghosts, etc., etc., etc. With this new season, we've got a new public event, a new weekly story mission, as well as Solar 3.0. Before we dive in, let's warm up. Rob, what were you up to this week in Destiny?
Did you write that intro yourself? That little
That I did.
I was not expecting that. When you said illegally parked, I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? I like that. You totally you threw me for a curveball on that. No, obviously, like everyone else, probably exploring the heck out of the Leviathan, trying to find all the little secrets, doing all the weird like public event, like mini boss things, and trying out the new public event, playing Sever, all that fun stuff, trying Solar 3.0. And because I there was a slight saga of me talking about trying to get Legend last season. I was able to get it literally the last night, about 2 hours before reset. And that was kind of awesome. But there, shout outs, there is currently a bug, very much like the Deadeye bug from a couple seasons ago, that if you unlock one of the gilded triumphs for Unbroken, it counts as your 9 things. So I currently have Unbroken unlocked as a title, even though I've only gotten Legend once. So I'm enjoying it while I can. It's probably going to get patched out real soon. Although this is kind of interesting because they've never redacted a seal once it's been unlocked. So I'm intrigued to see how they handle this, because I am not the only person who has taken advantage of this exploit. You do need to have at least 8 to 9 unlocked. So you have to go Legend at least once in order to get this like kind of broken, ironically, unbroken seal. So I did that, which is kind of fun, and then I started working on the Gilded just to do it. But I am trying to get Legend for the next 2 seasons so I can earn it legit. But yeah, so I did that this week. That was kind of fun too.
Cool. That's pretty funny. I would take advantage of it while I can.
Oh yeah.
Robbie, what about you? What's one thing in particular that you've been enjoying this opening week of the season?
One thing? Oh, that's hard. Only one thing. I actually enjoyed looking for the bubble hits, not gonna lie.
Me too.
That's one thing that I do usually with at least one friend that also likes to get collectibles. You know, because I'm from the generation growing up with like Spyro and Banjo-Kazooie and all those like collectathon games. So I don't know why, but it's always been fun to me. And I like really avoid looking at guides and video tutorials and stuff. So I just like going and spending, you know, a couple hours looking for things. But it's cool because I feel like that's a really nice way to get to know spaces, especially when we get new spaces to explore, right? And a lot of times even, you know, going through things and having conversations, we end up, you know, talking about lore and things I didn't know about, Leviathan myself and Callus and all these things. So like, I guess I'm saying finding the bubble hits, but it was like the whole thing, the whole experience with a couple friends finding the bubble hits was the highlight of my week for sure.
Absolutely. As for me, I've been enjoying also just like you, exploring the Leviathan. I have a particular connection to the Leviathan space and stuff because me and a lot of the people in like my little Destiny friend group, a lot of our first raid experiences were aboard the Leviathan. So this is all very cool to be back there. So I've liked having a new patrol space within there because that's something I've wanted for a long time. So first order of business is that we should probably discuss the new public event, which is the main grindable activity within this season. It's called Nightmare Containment. It's got 3 tiers so far. And you stick a giant pole in the ground, you kill stuff, deposit things, as usual. And occasionally you get a cool little flaming scythe thing and go kill stuff with that. Turn into the Grim Reaper, and then you can deposit a new currency. It's like vestiges of dread or something like that,
Yep.
and then you get a new weapon. I believe it drops haunted weapons. Does it drop the opulent weapons at all?
I don't think I've gotten an opulent weapon from that.
Okay, I think that's just the chests.
I think so.
Okay, so Rob, what are your thoughts on this new public event in comparison to the others? Maybe in comparison to the other activities we've gotten, because public events are a little different than maybe like a 6-man activity from a different season.
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I do like that they gave two variations of loading into the public space. You can try to like I think it you can select the one where it tries to prioritize you into an active public event that's going on, which is kind of nice versus like, look, I just want to explore and do kind of like patrol stuff. And so it's nice to have that option. And it feels like every time that I've jumped in, there's a public event going on when I do the containment version. So that's nice.
Good.
The public event itself kind of feels like the what was the event on Mars where you had to take out all the hive?
Escalation protocol, right?
Yeah, it feels like a mini version of Escalation Protocol where it's just a bunch of ads, kill them as quickly as possible, take out a boss, and then go to the next wave. It's obviously a lot shorter because there's only 3 waves. Um, so far, we've only had 1 week. I've already kind of scouring Twitter and Reddit and seen that there's quite a few people like oh this is gonna get boring really fast. And yeah, it probably will. I mean, what seasonal activity doesn't?
Exactly.
But I'm also kind of assuming we still have 2 weeks of the event that we haven't. Like we know there's going to be at least 2 more bosses. We don't know how it's going to change up the public event. If it's just going to be the same, kill enemies, kill a boss, kill enemies, kill a boss, and then kill a final boss. If it's just going to be that 2 more times. And if it is that, it is what it is. But if it's not, then it'll be exciting to kind of see what they change. I do feel like if I were to give like a genuine kind of criticism of between this and previous season, it's kind of interesting because last season was the launch of Witch Queen and the PsyOps battleground activity on top of that felt pretty meaty in terms of content, and then this feels kind of light. And I almost wish this is the season that we got something like PsyOps Battlegrounds because they're a little more lengthy and in depth, and they kind of feel like mini strikes. And I feel like that would have been a better like stopgap. Like if last season all we got was like a public event on top of the drop of Witch Queen, then that would have seemed like a little bit more like, okay, well, this is the drop of a new expansion. It's okay that this is kind of a light kind of public event activity for the season. And then next season give us something a little more interesting like strikes. But it's the other way around where it's like we have so much content last season to play with all the Witch Queen and the Throne World that getting the strikes on top of that was like, wow, there's a lot of activity. But now it feels like there's a huge kind of like drop because we're getting a public event versus like getting kind of a lengthy activity. So in terms of like how much time you're going to waste per activity, it feels a little light in that sense because you can go through the public event pretty quickly. But I like the event. I think it's cool. It'll definitely get boring by the end of the season. But right now, the weapons are pretty neat, and it's cool to get some of the opulent weapons back. And being able to craft them is like the closest, or like the next progression of the chalice that we had during Season of Opulence. So it feels good.
Mm-hmm. So to play devil's advocate, what would you say to someone who said like, do you think having a new patrol space in addition to the public event evens it out, or do you think that's not enough to?
Yeah, no, yeah, and you bring up a good point because we also got the Sever activity, which we'll talk about shortly.
Mhm.
So it's not like I guess it's just like it's so common like when we're talking about these like we always reduce it down to what's the new seasonal activity that dropped, and it's easy to kind of like ignore the other stuff. But you're absolutely right because we did get a pretty sizable patrol space with certainly some cool like mini public events within there. If you hang out in one of the patrol spaces long enough, you're bound to encounter like I know in the pleasure gardens there's like a mini variant of like the dogs and a couple other like bosses that you can get some triumphs for, and you can get sweet
Mhm.
rewards for doing. And then there's periodically a bunch of nightmares that come up and they try to swarm you. And what's really cool is there's one where like there's a one of Keidel's scions that's like captured, and you can free him, and then he hangs out in the area and like fights with you for a while. So
Oh yeah.
there's definitely no shortage of like kind of neat, cool stuff to do. But it's also one of those like, I mean, you do get rewards for them, so it is worth your time to kind of hang out in the patrol space and do bounties and things like that. Um, but I would say if I'm going just off of the public event, it feels a little light. But when you do factor into the mix that we did technically get a new patrol destination, well, new in the sense that it's out of the content vault. I think it's good. I see some of the arguments or complaints that it's like all we got was a public event, but you're right, it is more than that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, public event is automatically a little underwhelming. Robbie, what about you? What's your response to that?
I get why they added it. I actually think it's an interesting choice because that was something that I mentioned a bunch of times last season, where like even on Witch Screen, the event of the destination was like match made and not actually open world. So this is kind of the opposite, right? Because you can start it with 1-2 people, and then by the end on tier 3 you might have like 6 people over there, and then
Right.
it goes way faster and easier. I do also agree that those little patrol things that you can do, they help out, and I feel like they're there because like what they give you like 40 currency for
Something like
each
that.
one, so you need to make a bunch of them. So if you want to keep opening that last thing at the tier 3 one that costs 500, grabbing those patrols as you're going along with this event is really like advantageous because you end up with the currency enough to open the thing and getting yourself a gun. In a way, I do like it because it's like an auto clicker adventure, like kill stuff mindlessly, don't worry about anything, and just farm your guns. Literally just farm your guns. There's you don't have to be very involved in anything that's going on around you. As long as things are dying, you're gonna be fine, and you get the reward at the end. And it doesn't take like a really long time just to get like the one thing. And maybe that's one thing that I didn't like about some of the previous ones, that like, why am I going to spend 15-20 minutes in here and just get one gun with a terrible roll and then just to do it all over again, right? This one feels a bit more rewarding in the sense that it doesn't take too much of your time.
Mhm.
And at the same time, I feel like it contrasts, and I know you guys mentioned the other activity that we'll talk about, but it also contrasts with the fact that in this season you can farm the dungeon, right? So like if you want to get it in an activity that's definitely more involved, so you can go and farm that. Heads up, by the way, the second boss has like a weird glitch where you can choose the damage phase, and if you do it on master, you get pinnacle gear every single time.
Right.
So you can get to pinnacle cap easy peasy this week or next week, or whenever you're doing it until they patch it. But so that's farmable now, which is great. And this is also farmable. So I feel like they gave you options, and then it's like, just go and get the loot you want, because in the end it's not like most people, they're not farming for like the perfect roll at this point. They're farming for like the red border so they can craft their perfect gun, and that's gonna take you never know. It could be super quick for like a gun you want, or you can keep getting red borders or not red borders for a gun that you actually maybe not that interested into. So I feel like regardless, like the amount of time it's going to take to unlock all of them is pretty chunky. You're going to have to spend a lot of time in these activities, so them being shorter for that reason, I rather it be that way. I don't want to spend half an hour just to get one, and then it not be a red border and it not be the gun you wanted or things like that.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, that is something to think about. It is definitely not a huge time commitment. I will say, I could be wrong. It feels a lot longer, or not a lot longer, but a little bit longer than other public events. As far as public events go, it's pretty long. I guess if you compared it to Blind Whale, I think it's shorter than Blind Whale. Like Blind Whale goes on for a very long time.
Maybe I think it's just about the amount of people you have, because, for example, I think we did one with like 2 or 3 people only. Got to tier 3, and this was the first day when it dropped, right? So we were like 10 levels under everything still, and it was hard to get the boss down with 3 people because we didn't have the DPS. But then the one thing that I really appreciated is that it's not like in the Moon, for example, in the Altars of Sorrow, where like if you fail, you failed and you have to start all over again. This one gives you the chance to kind of like try again. So we managed to start it over, and it started on tier 3, and then some people joined, and then we were 4, 5, 6 people, and then it actually went down. So I actually appreciated that, because you can, and that's something that happened a lot with the blind well, that you would go in there alone or with one friend, and then you cannot do a tier 3 with 2 people. It's pretty impossible. But
Yeah,
on this
exactly.
one, you can start it, and you're kind of at least protected in the way that, like, if you don't get random people to join on the same instance as you immediately, you might eventually, and then you can kind of like still try again and then see if people will join. So it's a bit of a safety net that you got there in regards of like your time investment.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the scalable thing is an interesting concept. I didn't even know that it was going to be quote unquote like scalable until after it dropped. Rob, I have a question for you. How does this compare to Escalation Protocol, Blindwell, and Altars of Sorrow? Speaking of such events.
Yeah, I mean, we've come a long way since Escalation Protocol. For those of you who maybe don't know, that was from the Warmind DLC, which was the second kind of content release from D2's launch. That was the introduction to this version of Mars, which has been sunset. And it was a very long public event that had like 7 waves, with a final boss that was usually had some kind of pretty light mechanic associated with it, where it's like you had to damage it in a certain place, or you had to like blow up Thrall next to it in order to be able to damage it, or something like that. Like they did some stuff, and that's how you got the World Line Zero catalyst completed, is you had to damage it each week with each boss variant. That one was pretty cool. Again, very, very long and tedious. And the rewards were pretty crappy for a long time, but then they kind of updated them. And for that, the rewards were super useful, because that was when we still had the dual primary, and things like shotguns and fusion rifles were in the special slot or in the heavy slot. And so like the shotgun that came along with that was very, very coveted, as well as the sniper rifle. And in terms of length, obviously the containment is like way shorter, and I would say the rewards are way higher. But we've come a long way since early D2 year 1. In terms of Blindwell, I still think Blindwell's probably, it's hard to say because I've done it so many times that I'm kind of like sick of it as well. Whereas like this feels still very fresh. And we also, and again, I'm going to preface, like, we still haven't done the other 2 variants of it or seen the other 2 bosses. So we don't know if they have different mechanics, or if it's literally just going to be a different boss standing exactly where this one is standing. And you just have to like knock his health down and then destroy the little thingies and then kill the guys and then damage him again. Like, is it just going to be that 2 more times? And if that's the case, that kind of sucks. But if we get more interesting mechanics, then it might kind of stack up. I would say in terms of time duration, it feels about the same as a blind well, like tier 3, even when you do like the unstable charge at the end. Usually the final boss goes so quick in blind well that's like the least time consuming part.
That's
So
true.
it feels about the same as that, but certainly a lot faster than Escalation Protocol. And the rewards are pretty cool. It's fun. It's fun. I actually was getting flashbacks to the public event from House of Wolves from D1, where as soon as you like defeat the boss, you have to go run around and find chests that potentially have keys in them, and everyone's kind of running around in different directions, and you have like someone does an emote when they found what room has the secret chest in it. Like that's kind of cool to have that little bonus at the end, and every once in a while you can get like a nice reward from those. So yeah, and in terms of kind of like how it stacks up, I would say it's pretty solid. Compared to like Blindwell or Escalation Protocol. But again, it's also like time will tell. Everything's still so fresh and new that it's still exciting.
That's true. That's
Kind
true.
of a honeymoon period still, but we'll see.
I was about to say the same
Yeah.
thing. Yeah. Robbie, what about you?
Well,
How did-
two things that Rob mentioned, like that I actually realized. So one thing is that this boss, at least this one, we don't know about the other two, obviously, but they're basically held gated, right? Unlike the blind whale that you can melt. These ones you gotta break the thingies, as you said before.
Mhm.
What are they called? Oracles? I don't know what they
I
are.
don't
You,
know.
you
The
gotta
little
Yeah.
break the
darkness things.
thingies, right?
They're a
Yeah,
thing with
yeah.
a thing.
Yeah, so you break the thingies and then you can keep damaging him after a couple waves of ads. So they're held gated, so you cannot melt them, unlike the other one. That adds to the length of it. I still don't think it's like the best, thing to do to a
Yeah.
boss. Because like if you can melt him, just go ahead and melt him. But
Right.
I don't know, held gating things is never been one of my favorite mechanics in the game.
Mhm.
And the other thing was I just forgot. No, I just remembered again. Sorry. The other thing that is in comparison, at least for me, to the blind whale is that I feel like, and again, me being newer, obviously, when I started playing the blind whale, or everybody already played it to death, but for me it was kind of new. So it was that transition, and I noticed it, and I think it's happening the same with everything, like similar things like this one. It's like I don't know the spawns yet, so it still feels like I have to pay way more attention than I usually would in regards of like where I need to be looking at to kill things, or pre-aiming, or throwing a grenade, or things like that, right? But I feel like, at least for most players, and maybe it happens without you realizing it, but once you start learning all the spawns and stuff, that's when it becomes like a bit mindless, and that's when you start getting a bit bored of it, because you're not involved anymore. You're just literally just going through the motions of repetition at that point.
Yep. Yep. And
And
that's a lot of activities.
yeah, but I mean, at least I haven't gotten to that point yet with this one, so it definitely still feels very new. And again, I want to echo that sentiment. I hope it's not just the last boss at the end, but I worry that it will be, because if, like, at first when I saw there were three, I thought, oh, that'd be cool if they have like one per area of the new zone. But this one has like a whole stage and everything, and doors on the sides, and like it feels like it was purposefully made for that. And the other areas, I don't think they really have something like that. So
Mhm.
I'm kind of like hoping that they will be there, but I'm almost sure that they will be on the same space. Um, the other thing about it was like the chests, getting the random key and going and finding your chests and to open it and get a gun out of it or something, which is also like a really good way to farm things. But the thing I don't like about that is that it breaks up your group a lot, because if you're playing with friends and someone gets a key, and you can only hold one key, right? So you don't want to finish the event, which you might get another key. So you want to go and open it real quick, and then you leave your friends to fend for themselves in the event or something. Or so yeah, it's just like, and you get, and maybe two people get keys, and then they're in different areas, so you gotta go to different places and find the right chest that you can open, and all these things. So I feel like that doesn't help a lot of like people sticking around in the one place and acting as a group, because it literally forces you, and it's not the key that is the problem, it's the holding only one key at a time that is the problem.
Yep.
Sure.
I agree.
What do you guys think of the scythe in the activity?
I mean,
Where you deposit the thing.
it feels like the Iron Battle Axe from Rise of Iron, and I think it's even using
Exactly.
it's using the same sound effect, which is it's fine. It's definitely a cool. I know when the trailer first dropped, I think a lot of people were like, "Oh, this is going to be the new glaive." Like, cool. Like, but it's cool. It's another one of those where it's like, yeah, it's fun to just like slay out with it. And I know there's some like triumphs and bounties that you can get done by like getting like consecutive kills with it. So it's cool, but it's like, okay, they appear and then they're gone after a certain time. It's fun, but
yeah. It's what it feels aesthetically. It feels kind of random,
yes,
a little weird. It's like, because with something like the Iron Battle Axe, there's like there's like story behind that. It's like, oh yeah, that makes sense, and it's like super cool, and there's history, and then there's just kind of like this random scythe thing.
Yep.
I don't really know how that fits in to like I don't
Oh,
know.
the
It's more of
nightmares.
the game,
The title is actually called Reaper.
which is
So
really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean
yeah,
that is
that is a
that's a title.
cool title. Yeah, that is a cool title. So on that term, it fits. There's also the finisher that's on the season pass. There's also the side, like and slashing through
Yeah, it's pretty
someone,
cool.
which is also pretty cool. And again, we have like a baseball bat, so like I can't complain about anything.
So speaking of like story implications, what do you guys think of the current story? Regarding Sever, we'll get to that in a second. But like the opening cutscene and
Oh,
the
can I
whole
say
like
something about
premise.
that? Because like I need Rob to explain this one to me because
Go
there's
for it.
maybe like lore for it. All right, so when we did the whole ceremony with Eris Morn, and then she was like, "Now we're bound" and stuff. So like, I don't understand if now Eris Morn and I are like a thing. Like, did I just get married in game? I'm not sure about that, right?
No, you're
But
not
that's not
married
my
in
main
game.
concern. When she asks like Savala and the crow to like they put some objects from their past, right? Like something meaningful
Right.
to them. And Savala takes out these knitting sticks and puts them on the table.
Right.
And I'm like, well, it's cool that you like knitting. There's nothing wrong with that. But like, I never knew that about you, Savala.
I believe that's from his like wife.
Yeah, I
That's
think we're about to get I think we're about to get some heavy backstory with Zavala and whatever he must have been married or had a lover and then they were killed, maybe Twilight Gap or the Tower
so.
or something.
I
All right, so
actually
this will
looked it
lead
up.
to something, right? Because that was like a big. When we were watching it, and again, I was with friends, so we were kind of commenting after the fact. Like the
Yeah.
knitting sticks were like so random that it really like it became the whole point of the whole cutscene was the knitting sticks. Like there must be a reason why. I just don't know it. But okay, I'm
Yeah.
look forward to the backstory then.
I think Sophia, I think is her name. The spooky in the opening mission,
Right. Where he's like,
the
follow
figure.
her. Yeah.
Yeah. That actually kind of freaked me out a little bit. She starts moving backwards suddenly. That is his wife, and there was like one lore piece about it, and I believe she was not a guardian. She was a mortal human, and she
Okay.
just died of old age. But
Oh.
that is all I know about it. I guess we'll see more.
So
But
they're making it feel more like something tragic happened.
yeah, right.
But
But
yes.
well, he's immortal, and she's not. So I mean, that's kind of sad in the sense that you know, Zavala will
Yeah.
keep on living, and I don't know. So overall consensus, it's fine. It's a new thing to do, but hopefully it gets shaken up in the coming weeks.
I hope so.
Next thing we should talk about, speaking of story, we have a new weekly story mission called Sever. And you basically, the premise, I don't know how this is going to work mechanically speaking. I'm assuming it's going to be a little different each week. But you jump into the like underbelly of the Leviathan, and at least for this first one, you're working with Crow, and Crow is battling with the demon of his past self. And you have to go inside, stick your whatever, the pole thing, the haunted pole thing, and sever Callus's connection with the darkness, or at least attempt to. And so this one, we go in. Crow is struggling, and Crow actually fails to dispel his nightmare, I believe is what happens. You end up fighting a nightmare of Ficrul, the fanatic, in the Gauntlet of all places, which was pretty cool.
Yep.
And yeah, overall, I liked it. But Rob, what were your thoughts?
Genuinely, I was telling you guys before we started, genuinely jumped out of my seat the first time. I was playing it by myself. I always like to do story stuff by myself the first time. Playing by myself, the lights were off in my office. Was not expecting big slasher boy to jump around a corner. And I like jumped out of my seat a little bit the first time. So that was like awesome and got a nice cool adrenaline rush. It's kind of cool, creepy. It just a neat activity, something different. Again, this is one of those we'll have to see because I think we're getting like 5 or 6 different versions. So it'll be interesting to see if we go to different locations. Maybe eventually one of them has us going to Callus's like throne room and challenging some version of him. Like I'm excited to see like what ends up happening in the coming weeks. And it's just neat. It's cool to have And the rewards on it are good. If you get one of those weird glowy key things that you can pop there, you get some pretty decent rewards. You get a pinnacle for doing it each week, so it's fun. It's got cool story. You definitely got some cool exposition between Crow kind of talking with his former self, and that's kind of a neat idea where it's like literally his former self is like dead, and he's sort of fighting, which makes you wonder if there's other guardians that have to grapple with something that they've done in the past, and like
Yeah.
it could come back to haunt them. Like the implications kind of behind this are pretty heavy, and I'm intrigued to see like what else they do with it, if there is anyone else that has some kind of dark storied past. So
Yeah, absolutely.
overall, I like it.
Yeah, me too. I think in comparison to like previous weekly story mission sort of things, like Expunge was like billed as a story mission. I did not. I don't think it even counted as a story mission. This feels more like we have more story content. But yeah, I like the mission. I'm excited to see where this goes because we're not going to fight the fanatic every time. We're going to fight someone different, and I'm hoping maybe we'll get more characters to go work with in the underbelly. Hopefully, it's not like Crow every time. As much as I like Crow, but yeah, I think it's cool. It's exciting. There was a cool little gimmick, like you were talking about the big immune cleaver dude. He was cool.
Right.
Robbie, what were your thoughts on the weekly story mission?
I liked it. I think I actually liked the nightmare hunts. So this was like a quick little thing about them. I like how, because again, I've never really played the Leviathan before, so for me, like exploring the spaces, I've seen videos about it. So when you get teleported to the thing where you have to jump through the little circles, and obviously it doesn't have the mechanic of people letting you know where you have to jump or whatever, but like being able to experience the space and like a light version of those mechanics with the nightmares, and the story was good. The only thing I didn't like about that was like on repeat, because I did it more than once. You have to listen to Crow again, and you can't skip it. So, and it's a long conversation. So I was like, make it skippable, please. But obviously, the first time you go through it, you listen to the whole thing, and then Shocker. It has really nothing to do with that, but like the conversation with Amanda Holiday. I'm intrigued. I'm just
Oh,
gonna
the
say
little.
that.
Oh yeah.
I'm very intrigued about that. So that was cool. So I agree with you. Like it is like a little tiny activity. Luckily, it's more than one. 6 is a lot. Like I'm happy about that, because I feel like you said this is more of like a story presentation rather than just like a mind like the other one, right? Like the public event is a mindless activity, and this one is more of like story and lore, and you get tidbits of information here and there if you pay attention to it, or if you care to pay attention.
Right.
So yeah, I'm actually happy that they have this thing, because it really balances out the other activity.
Yeah, I agree. And I believe it'll be cyclable. It's something else to do. So, I mean, that gives you 3 things to cycle through within the gameplay loop of the season, because you got patrol space, you got the public event, which I would consider separate from the patrol space per se, and then the weekly story mission. And I think that's a pretty sizable amount of stuff to like rotate through.
Speaking of the Amanda Holiday thing, what's the I was trying to figure out what the implicate, because I watched it twice. What's the implication? Is that her finding out finally that Crow is Uldren Sov?
I think it
Or-
was her finding out that Crow knows that he was Uldren. That's what I interpreted it as.
Oh, okay. That's what I thought. And it's like him not like apologizing to her or something like that. Like that's why she's pissed off. Like that's the part that didn't quite make sense to me.
Sure. Yeah.
Like was he supposed to apologize or feel bad? Like I don't know, because it's like obviously he's kind of ashamed, and now that he knows who he is, because he talked about it, it's like people used to just kill me because of what I've done, and like so like I just it didn't quite, like it felt like there was part of the conversation we missed, and maybe that's like the whole point, is as the season goes on we'll get more of their conversation back and forth.
Yeah, hopefully.
But
I'm wondering how we even got access to that conversation. Why is that on the computer? They publicly
Yeah.
broadcasting this for us? Or are we snooping on people here?
I think Sabala is terrible with like managing communications. Every mission always starts with Sabala saying, "We received a random communication. We didn't know what it was." It's like, dude,
Yeah.
you've been doing this for 30 years. Come on.
He's
Like,
just bad with technology. He's old.
yeah, yeah,
It's fine. It's fine.
yeah. No, but I mean, I would be pissed too if I was Amanda Holiday and you think you're dating this guy and then turns out he's the other guy. Like.
So are
Um,
they dating? Is that the
I don't know.
implication?
That's
I don't
kind
know
of
either.
It's also sort of what I gathered.
honestly, I hope so. Like hashtag Crowmanda. I don't know. Is that a
Crowmanda.
thing?
I mean, I don't think they're dating yet. Like, not like officially. It's like one of those things where you're just like, you're talking. There's a connection there. But I don't
Well,
know.
'cause I know in what season of the Worthy or whatever, when she's like, "Oh, we should get a drink or something afterwards." Like,
Oh yeah.
so
Yeah.
like I kind of assume like, oh, she thinks he's pretty cool because he's like helping out. But we never got like when he kind of his mask gets taken off during the assassination attempt and everyone realizes who he is. Like there was never any scene with Amanda, like with what her reaction was when she found out this person that's been sort of helping them all along was the one who killed Cade. Like we never got that scene, so I've never really known what their dynamic was between that season and now. And now we finally got this bit, and it feels like there's something missing from like this overarching story. Where is it a Cromanda thing, or like I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either, but like I actually liked it a lot, and not
Yeah.
because of the Cromanda thing I just said, and it's kind of funny and everything, but because like before when you do the mission, it's like a personal struggle, right? Like he's struggling with himself and with his
Right.
past and with his act. Like this is such a character arc that has been developing for the last couple seasons, and it's really nice to see it move forward.
Right.
But it's like a personal thing, it's like him battling literally his own nightmare. And then after that was done, it's like, all right, but all this has like social repercussions around him in his actual life, like so the battle goes beyond him battling his own nightmare. It's gotta affect his personal relationships and his friendships and work with colleagues or everything. So this was like added a little bit of dimension to him as a character, and that's why I really like that they added this.
Absolutely. I think Crow / Aldrin is one of the most well developed characters in the Destiny franchise currently.
Yes.
He gets a lot of the screen time. They dive into a lot of stuff like you're talking about, which is very cool to see. Do you guys think, in terms of predictions, put on your theory hats, do you think he's going to turn back to being Aldrin, or where do you think this arc is going? Because it's definitely going somewhere.
You think like a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy where it's like his nightmare keeps like pestering him into doing it, so he's just like, fine, I'll just be the guy I used to be. I've kind of wondered if that is maybe the direction it's going. I still would like to think that he's working on becoming the new Hunter Vanguard. Like that's why they're giving him so much screen time. But you said, he's also just an interesting character, and his sort of arc in terms of like his importance in the whole, like with everything that's gone on in the last since Forsaken. I don't know. I don't know.
Robbie, what about you? Do you have any predictions?
All right, so here's my prediction. Probably,
Here comes
entirely wrong. Come on, man. Oh yeah. Anyway, so I feel like for him to actually become that, Vanguard Hunter or everything, whatever he's gonna become, like it's not about getting rid of his nightmare. It's just like about learning to live with it. Right. And kind of free himself from it, not to actually destroy it. So I think that's kind of like hopefully where this is gonna go to, because the whole thing with Mara also didn't have like a big resolution in terms of obviously her knowing that he knew who he was and all talking to him and all these things. So I feel like for him to eventually, rid himself of the burden of her, she has to just accept who he was and who he is now, and then he can become something new. So I don't think it's gonna be like either kill the nightmare or become evil. I think it's just gotta be like that transition of acceptance, and then hopefully see how the whole like I don't actually care about you, sister, anymore thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for him to
So
cast that
that's what
aura.
I hope to see, and that would be my prediction. But again,
That would be very
uh,
cool to see. I mean, that would make sense because they did a lot of build up with him and Mara's relationship and explaining about their whole weird dynamic. So that would be cool. That would be a satisfying end to his arc. I feel like. So without further ado, we can transition to Solar 3.0 if you guys would like to.
Yeah.
So instead of Void 3.0 this time, instead of Stasis, we got Solar 3.0, the new element with a bunch of aspects and fragments and stuff like that. So what this opens up is a ton of cool build crafting, and also naturally the new subclass becomes a really good one for the current like meta state of the game. So Rob, have you been having fun playing with Solar 3.0? And if so, what class? What have you been doing with it?
So I started off with Warlock, and I think the initial like day one reaction was, wow, what the hell have they done to Warlock Solar? Because the aspects, two of them are Top Tree Dawnblade from like the previous iteration, and like that kind of sucks because everything from like the original Bottom Tree Dawnblade feels very gutted. Um, and like certain interesting choices were made, like the healing nade is its own grenade now, and it's just like the builds from Solar in Warlock felt pretty good and diverse as is, and almost feels like they didn't need to be touched, but obviously with the Solar 3.0 it had to happen. But then as the days have gone on, people have started finding new builds and interesting kind of ways to play the game, and I've watched a few of the videos, and kind of some build crafting and kind of try to do my own thing. And there's some pretty wacky stuff that you can do with like Starfire Protocol and Sun Bracers. So I think, and it felt like this with Void 3.0 when Hunters with it first came out. Like everyone thought it was just going to be hot garbage. But as it turns out, it's like one of the most invaluable things in like high end content. So I think the initial reaction was, "Oh, this sucks." Certain aspects were split apart that shouldn't have been, and that was kind of the same thing with 3.0 or fragments. I'm sorry. Um, well, both of them kind of feel like they were split up with warlocks in weird ways. I have not touched Titan. I just started playing Hunter last night, and Solar 3.0 was really good to Hunters, like the fixes that they did to Blade Barrage, and just some of the other things they've done with the throwing knives and some of the build crafting you can do with that, and the cool grenade sticky bomb that you can kind of build up and chuck. Really cool stuff. So I've been having a lot of fun. I think as time goes on, we will find new builds and new exotics that have manifest themselves in very interesting ways, and we just haven't seen it yet because it's still the first week. But I've been enjoying it. Like Void 3.0, it completely complicates the game in a wonderful way. That's like you can build into this as much as you want, but at the end of the day, if you just want to do the minimalist of like, oh, getting like extra melee energy when I use my dodge, that seems cool. Like I'll just, you can kind of play around with fragments and aspects and not have to build into it too much just to do strikes. But if you want to go all in and be like this constantly throwing knives or constantly throwing grenades and snapping your fingers as a warlock, like you can do that, and there's a lot of potential. So, I think it's good. And as the season goes on, we'll find even more ridiculous things.
Yeah, no, I love what you said about that, about the fact that you can, there's the option for you to like build into stuff and
Right.
create super cool stuff. But also, if you're not into that, I mean, you can just click buttons and whatever you click is going to work out fine.
Yeah.
If you're doing like a typical activity, you'll be fine if you just click stuff. So I love that. I love that, like, you know not only depending on the player, like if you want to, like if you're someone who likes build crafting stuff, or if you like just just clicking a subclasses and picking your super and running with that.
Right.
It's also just like depending on your mood, maybe maybe I
Right.
don't feel like building into this complicated thing right now. So yeah, I agree with you
This
100%.
I mean, I'm sure there's some people who have played the hell out of MMOs and have already kind of had this revelation, but I was kind of late to the game, and the first like kind of heavy build game that I got into was like Diablo 2 and 3, where you can kind of go through that game casually, at least in Diablo 3, and not really have to care too much about your build a whole lot. And then when you get through the campaign and you start doing like Nephilim rifts, you're like, oh, I can do a slightly more difficult one. Oh, I can do a slightly more difficult. Hey, this is actually pretty tough. Maybe I need to start caring about what I'm like putting into my build and what weapons I'm using. And before you know it, like you can figure out how deep the rabbit hole goes. And I think with Solar 3.0 and Void 3.0 we got last season, we're getting opportunities to do some crazy stuff that a lot of other games have been doing for years. But it's kind of cool to see it how it manifests in Destiny, manifest Destiny. And see how it works out with that, where it's like, yeah, if you just want to do strikes and you don't care about anything, that's fine. But if you're like, hey, I want to try out these nightfall things, like, oh, I'm dying pretty easy, maybe I actually need to be paying attention to my stats and what exotic I'm using and how I'm kind of building out my kit. And like, so it's giving that sort of organic sense of progression to the player of like, oh, this is something that I actually want to like learn more about and maybe watch some videos and try some things out. Cause like that's what I with Hunter 3.0 or Solar 3.0 is I saw some of the builds that people were doing. I'm like, that's pretty cool, but I really, really like the throwing knives. So I've been using Ophidia Spathe, which gives you an extra knife, and I've been kind of doing some other interesting things along with that. So it's like it's cool as like here's a jumping off point. Now go see how deep the rabbit hole is, and I think just getting these 3.0 subclasses is a fantastic way to do that.
That's a great way to put it. I love that because there's like you said, there's little things you can pick out, like the Ophidia Spade thing, and then maybe find that fun, and you get into harder content, and then you're like, oh, maybe I should build more into this, and
Right.
yeah, no, that was very well put. Robbie, what about you? Have you been diving into Solar 3.0 at all?
A little bit, yeah. And I mean, a lot of what Rob said, obviously, I feel the same way. So the one thing is, yeah, I've seen other people play. So I haven't really gone into Titan or Hunter myself because I've been just doing Warlock for everything lately. Um, the barrel roll that makes them like the Hunter barrel roll that gives them radiance or
Right.
whatever. Pretty funny, pretty cool. The Titan looks amazing as well, especially with that helmet from last season that was problematic. And I don't know, in PvE at least for now, it seems okay. But the Warlock, like when I started also watching some build videos and stuff, and yeah, at the beginning people probably thought it was the weakest one, but then this grenade spam and all those things, they are really cool. But at the same time, at least personally, I feel like I got a bit tired of like ability spam so
Yes.
much. Because what I want out of a build maybe is more of like a interest interactions, right? So what I actually have been doing after obviously playing around a little bit with like my infinite grenades and things was trying out exotic armor pieces that I've usually like totally just disregarded. So like Promethean spurs that give you both rifts at the same time, yeah, maybe not very useful, but like at least some interesting things can happen. Definitely could be useful in PvP. Um, other exotics that usually don't play too much, and the one thing that I did notice was that after like a whole lot of experimenting, when I was going back to what to play with my warlock for, let's say, content that I like, the dungeon that I was still learning, and so it was like harder for me to rely on grenade spam or something like that, was that I just went back to the what's the name of the gloves with the snakes? I'm so bad at
Oh,
memory.
Ophidian
Sorry.
aspect.
Yeah, so I literally went back to Ophidian aspect because I feel like I had a decent enough build that it would give me like good DPS, good survivability. Plus, if you're really not caring too much about that and just worrying more about gunplay, then you can utilize those fragments just to boost your stats and get yourself almost to like triple hundreds.
Right.
So, and I think we still have like two of them that are still locked. One of them is definitely the plus 10 discipline or something like that. So anyway, this is just gonna get a little bit better. But it's also been really good for that, like for kind of like, I don't want to call it neutral play because it's not really neutral play, but I feel like you can build it well enough that you can still rely a lot on gunplay with something like the Ophidian aspects. So I actually like that. I don't feel like that was something that I got with Void, because with Void, when you try to use guns as part of a build, and I'm not saying this is the ideal build, obviously, but you were always aiming for like a Void gun to get like volatile rounds or things like that. Anyway, the gun was like a medium to an end. And I feel like with Solar, you can really make your gunplay shine.
Right.
With something like this, like I feel like it's a bit more, I don't know, open to different kinds of builds that are not just ability spam, and I'm kind of glad that is that way.
Yeah, like Radiance lends itself well to that. I think I assume Warlock and Titan are also pretty heavy on the Radiant buff, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the Scorch debuff.
Interesting enough, people are pointing out though, like it's easier with the Titan and Hunter to get radiance to the rest of your team, which like that always felt like that was like the Warlock's job as like the healer and support class, and now it's
Yeah.
like the other two classes do it easier, and I think that's like the big complaint is like the kind of the utility that Warlocks had has been sort of taken away. But I mean, we saw that with Void 3.0, right? Devour, which was unique to Warlocks, can now be done by Titans and Hunters. It's just like it's how you build into it, and some of the exotics still are more heavily attuned to that character subclass being able to do that better. Like you're not going to get a Phoenix Protocol equivalent on Titans or Hunters, although you could say Loreley Splendor kind of is at this point. But um yeah, I agree with you, Robbie. Like it definitely feels like there's a little more like support with the gunplay. But it just still feels like the fact of the matter is like ability spam is the way to do it. But what I'm intrigued by is because at right when the season first dropped, I played Solar a little bit and I was getting frustrated because like I just couldn't get the builds to work out. So I just went back to Void, and Void still feels really good. And I think that that's important because after all the seasonal mods are gone, is that new subclass still like viable? And I was still able to use Nothing Manacles. Like that build I kept the entire season and never took it off, and I was able to throw it on and still do just fine in tougher content and nightfalls and things like that this week. And then as time went on and I started playing with Solar 3.0, my concern is there's an artifact mod called classy restoration, where whenever you use your class ability, it gives you the restoration buff, and you can build into that, and basically you're invincible for like that 10 seconds. And then with all the other ability spam things, you can get your class ability back and spam it again, so you can virtually stay invincible in PvE in a lot of things, and that's like what people were doing in the dungeon. But that's going to go away at the end of the season. And so my concern is Solar 3.0 still going to be good at the end of the season, just like Void 3.0 is still good after the seasonal artifact is gone? And that's where I'm curious. Like we'll have to see how it all kind of washes out at the end of the season, is like how dependent are we on the seasonal artifacts? But I will say a nice little stopgap is we got a handful of weapons that are solar that have a new perk called Incandescent, which if you which adds Scorch to defeated enemies, which is like kind of like a mini Firefly, which is really cool. And so it's kind of neat that you can kind of build into it. And a lot of the builds that I was watching, people are like, well, if you have Incandescent, then you can kind of get the stacks going a little bit easier and keep things, your uptime is a lot higher. And I've been noticing that when playing with it. So it's cool, just as long as we continue to get solar weapons with Incandescent after this season is over, and that will continue to maybe get exotics that kind of support it, just like how we get more with Void. So it, we'll just have to see how it all washes out.
Yeah, the guns are good. Drank with Incandescent, I've been enjoying the hell out of that
too. Yeah, I've got one with Wellspring and Incandescent, and it's just so much fun to just keep. Well, and again, but it's all ability uptime.
Yeah, yeah.
And
Again, it's an ability to like avoid. That's kind of what I was saying, and like even like what you just mentioned, right? You become invincible with the rift.
right,
So now put on Promethean spurs, and you're not only invincible, but you're doing damage over it. You know,
right,
and it's an
exactly,
exotic that was really like no one ever used it, and I
right,
feel like that's a bit of the issue right now. People are focusing too much on like, oh, I get 2 grenades, I get all these things, but look at the other ones because and I feel that's a problem, maybe mostly for the warlock, and that's because the other the other two classes had like exotics that did things, but they never accounted for. They were never tuned, or they were never envisioned for those classes to ever have devour,
right,
or ever have equivalent things that the warlock had, like support things, like healing or this and that.
right,
uh, but so now they do, on top of the exotics that were like not accounting for those things. So they're getting like two amazing things at the same time. And warlocks, I feel like they're suffering a little bit because we don't have exotics that would benefit at the level that they can,
right,
because we already were tuned to having these things in the first place.
right.
um but yeah, try other exotics for sure. That's like my advice, and whatever I've been doing for fun is just going around doing weird things, and don't pay too much attention to YouTube.
I will say, and this sounds like really greedy and silly, but the one thing I was not looking forward to with Solar 3.0 is I was hoping that trip mine grenades were never ever going to leave the hunter subclass, because they feel like they are so a part of like
Their
part
kit.
of the hunter's identity is trip mine grenades. And young
Mhm.
Ahamkar Spine, that's like one of the first exotics that we ever got to see in like early D1, like pre-alpha stuff. And so like that always feels like so a part of its identity. And so it kind of like selfishly it bummed me out when I was like, oh, as a warlock I can now use trip mine grenades. Like it just kind of like that's like the one kind of bummer part of the 3.0 is like giving all the grenades to all the subclasses sort of like takes a little bit of that kit identity away. But like you said, like some of these exotics always feel built around that subclass having that specific ability, like hunters having the trip mine grenade duration and damage. And so I think as long as, and I know it sounds like kind of silly and counterintuitive because it's like everyone should just have access to everything all the time. But it's like, I think as long as certain subclasses still have some unique to them with part of that subclass. So like young Ahamkar Spine always being like, as long as warlocks and titans never get like a trip mine grenade exotic, then I think there's at least some sense of like identity to some of these subclasses still. But once you
Mhm.
start doing stuff like that, like I feel like it's gonna like muddle the uniqueness of some of these subclasses. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say? Like I
Yeah, no, it does, because you're still a class, like a main class, right? So
right,
it still should have like a basic kit of
right,
things, and then the sub class is, I don't know,
like
whatever you add on top of it. But
right,
if you make all the subclasses literally the same for all of them, then what's the point?
right.
Except the only thing that would change is like that you need resilience and you need mobility, and I need recovery to have like a shorter cooldown on class
Right.
ability. But besides that, yeah. No, I agree. You still need to
Like
keep like some identity.
I hope that hunters never get like a devour exotic. Like something that allows them to, oh, get a kill with your grenade and now you get devour. Like that should never be a thing for hunters because like yeah, it's a thing that you can build into and you can make happen on hunters, but it's like not a natural design for their subclass. And so it's like I hope there's still some part of each like I don't want warlocks to ever get a bubble because like that just
Right.
kind of seems like that feels like so much of like the Titans
Well, the
identity
hunters got
void.
the stasis bubble.
Right. Right.
It's not the same,
It's
but
yeah, but I see what you're saying. Like but like you're starting to creep, right? Like just slightly, and it feels a little odd. Like
yeah, it does.
I never thought that hunters would get like a renewal grasp type exotic where they can have like an overshield kind of in place because that feels like such a Titan thing. And again, there's like certain parts that I hope that identity always sticks with that character. Um, and it like with these 3.0s, it feels like that line's getting blurred a little bit, and that's okay in certain areas, but there still should be some distinguishing things that make those classes feel unique. So all of that to say, I hope Warlocks and Titans never get any kind of trip mine grenade exotic, selfishly.
All right. So I think that's about all the time I have today. But thank you guys for hopping on and chatting about Season of the Haunted. Thank you guys out there for listening and streaming this episode.
Ciao.
Peace out.
Bye.
You can put this voice recording away and go on with your life, because you and I both know you'd have me yapping in your ear for the rest of your days.
Want to further the discussion? Get in touch with us at any of our Twitter handles, all of which can be found at our podcast description.